What's up, everybody? I'm Aslan Hajavandi, joined by managing editor of Warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source, Ira Schoffel. Hit the thumbs up. We bring you some great news. Also, subscribe to our website. It's only $29.99. Takes you from now all the way up until September 1st. Gets you through spring football, basketball season, baseball season, preseason camp, and then maybe a top 5 team that you will be cheering for when the season rolls around. Hit the thumbs up as well. Ira, thanks for being here. The big news for Florida State today was going to the transfer portal and picking up another piece of the puzzle on the defensive side of things. And now it sounds like defensively there was a piece to fill the coaching staff, and it looks like maybe they've got that handled now as well, as we've heard some reports here on Tuesday evening.
Yeah, Pete Thamel from ESPN was the first to report it, that Florida State's found their new defensive backs coach, Patrick Surtain, and Mike Norvell, within minutes, tweeted a vague tweet, saying something along the lines of "Coach him up. It's a great day to be a Seminole." There you go. You can see the tweet up on the screen right there, basically confirming it. And what we were told is that Florida State probably is expected to announce it tomorrow. A lot of times when these deals are done, the parties involved can announce it, but the school won't officially announce it until they finish all their paperwork on the back end from an HR standpoint. So we expect that to happen maybe as soon as tomorrow. But yeah, Patrick Surtain is going to be Florida State's next defensive backs coach. It's a big name. It's probably a really positive hire for a lot of reasons. But it's another sign of how committed Florida State is to this football team and this football season.
I just can't imagine what it's like to be a Miami or a Florida fan, and Florida State goes in the portal and just keeps getting every single dude they want, every single dude that LSU seems to want or Southern Cal wants. Then you've got to patch up something on the back end of your defense in terms of a coach, and then you go get what sounds like expected. We're hearing probably on Wednesday, Patrick Surtain, a dude here, as you see on your screen, Ira, a guy that's been in the NFL for over 10 years as a player. Most recently, wasn't a defensive assistant here for the Dolphins this past season. And then obviously some really good roots down there in South Florida as being a head coach and winning some state titles there. So this on the field, off the field, just seems like a really good sort of fit for what Florida State's trying to get done here and take the next step.
Yeah, no question. I think the only question I guess people might have is the fact that he hasn't been a college defensive backs coach. But, look, I think he's so off. He's off the charts in so many other areas. The fact that, like you said, not only is he played for the Miami Dolphins for a long time, so he's really prominent in South Florida, but he coached at American Heritage, which is, a perennial state power. He led them to 3 state championships, had blue chipper after blue chipper after blue chipper, and has always had a good relationship with Florida State. If you remember when his son, Patrick Surtain II, was coming out of high school, he was, one of the top players in the country. Florida State was very involved in that recruiting process, and they weren't able to land him. But he was certainly not opposed to Florida State. I think he had a good relationship with Florida State through that process. And if you think about from a recruiting standpoint, a lot's been made about the first coaching staff Mike Norvell put together didn't have a lot of South Florida roots on it. Now they've done fine down there, and part of it's because they've added some support staff with connections down there. And that's gone a long way. But I think this is a really big hire for Florida State from the connection standpoint. But also, when you go back to that expertise as a coach, he has coached. He's coached, very elite high school football players, and he's spent this year with the Dolphins. So I don't think the learning curve to being a defensive backs coach in the college level is going to be very steep for Pat Surtain.
What does this show or demonstrate about this program right now, Ira? Again, he's a defensive backs coach for Florida State University. We're expecting to hear. This is not necessarily a defensive coordinator, but it's hard to think that this wouldn't be a really good fit in terms of his knowledge, his sort of background, be able to show kids, hey, man, I was in the league. I was a 3-time Pro Bowler. The way he can recruit. When Florida State's able to lose a guy like Marcus Woods and he goes to Arkansas, and then you fill him with a guy that might have NFL aspirations, like true NFL aspirations. What does it show about maybe where this program is going and the kind of cachet that maybe Mike Norvell has quickly developed?
Yeah, I think it's a continuation of what we've seen really for the last year. When at the end of 2021, going into 2022, Florida State made a much bigger commitment from an administration standpoint into support staff salaries, in terms of salaries in terms of new positions on the support staff, expanded the staff, scouting staff, recruiting staff, really put a lot of money into the season. And then you have this success of a 10-3 season. And much like when we had the conversation last week in a video that we did that people can see, still find on Warchant, our YouTube page, about Mike Norvell's contract and his extension, I don't feel like Florida State's going to skimp on that. Just like I didn't think they were going to skimp on this position because they're all in. I mean, they see the window of opportunity here for this football team. Certainly in 2023, where we've seen reports that they're, early polls where they may be a top 5 team in the country going into next season, but also for the future. I mean, if Florida State's all in, they want to, there was a perception that Florida State was trying to do things on the cheap for a while. And whether or not that was true, that's certainly not the case anymore. I don't know. We don't know the figures yet on Pat Surtain's contract, but I don't think it was somebody it wasn't like you went out on the cheap to hire him. They did I'm sure they did a really thorough search, and it seems like a home run from every category you could look at from my perspective in terms of knowledge, in terms of name recognition, in terms of recruiting ability, and the fact those connections in South Florida. It just feels like they really hit a home run.
Yeah, man. Again, just to give you guys a look once again, Surtain, 11-year NFL veteran, 3-time Pro Bowler, again, head football coach down at American Heritage High School. I think he was actually an assistant there a few years prior to that too, Ira. So he's earned his stripes, man. This isn't a guy that's just kind of fallen into jobs just because of his last name and what he did on Sundays. But again, just kind of, I mean, I don't want the other shoe to fall, Ira. Is the other shoe going to fall, or is this kind of just like maybe what the new normal is right now? Florida State fans need to embrace it.
Well, I think, when you get inertia going, I think it all kind of feeds on itself, and I think this program is probably attractive to him because of, the talent they've recruited, the fact that you brought in a Fentrell Cypress out of the transfer portal, the number 2 cornerback, possibly that was available in the transfer portal, maybe number 1 in some people's eyes, an all ACC caliber cornerback you went and got out of the transfer portal from Virginia, who's going to be in your secondary next year. You've got some really nice young talent in that secondary. So if Florida State didn't have a 10-3 season, if they weren't moving in the right direction, if they didn't have a lot of really promising talent on the roster, you probably couldn't make this hire. I think a year ago, if Marcus Woodson had left a year ago, I don't know that Florida State could have made this hire, but they're in a much better position now, and they're taking advantage of it.
I know you mentioned it a couple of times, Ira, but you talked about, this shows the investment that they're all in on this. I mean, does this kind of lead you to believe that, they're going to have to probably pay a pretty good premium for Surtain, or at least maybe more than they were paying Marcus Woodson?
It's a good question. It really is going to depend on how much he could have made at other schools. If there was competition for him, if his agent, and I don't know who his agent is. Mike Norvell's agent is Jimmy Sexton. A lot of times in the coaching world, if both parties have Jimmy Sexton as their agent, it can kind of be a symbiotic relationship. A lot of times the head coach and sometimes the assistant coaches have the same agent. So I don't know who Pat Surtain is, but he's he definitely would have been marketable if he let people know that he was willing to go be a college assistant coach. I'm sure there were a lot of schools interested, and then that kind of depends on how much you have to pay. But it wasn't like Florida State was paying Marcus Woodson a cheap amount. I mean, he was well paid as a defensive backs coach, not one of the highest ones in the country, but well paid. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the same ballpark. But my point is, there were some names floated out there. I think initially people talked about some of the guys on the support staff. Florida State has some guys on the support staff that would have been easy transitions, and not, I don't know that they would have been interested, but, Corey Fuller, Kawan Ratliff, guys who are on the Florida State staff right now, Antonio Cromartie, former FSU star. That's been a GA at Texas A&M. A lot of those guys, I don't know if it could have commanded the same salary. To me, those would have been hires where maybe you're looking to be a little bit more economical.
Yeah. As you mentioned, just 2 drafts ago, I mean, you mentioned the fact that the amount of guys that he's developed when he was there at American Heritage. I mean, back in 2021, that draft, 6 players were drafted that played for him at Heritage. So good players, high-end players.
Right.
I didn't realize Brian Burns played there too. So Brian Burns counts on that too. He can take some credit for that. This good times. Good times recovering Florida State football. You deserve it. You had to go through a mess to get here. Maybe the best sort of a combination they've had on a defensive backs coach and a coordinator in quite some time. I mean, also, do you think this maybe helps kind of quell a little bit of the concerns that the fans have about the defense? Now, listen, they got Jared Verse coming back. They did get Braden Fisk out of the portal. You mentioned Fentrell Cypress. They got the young man out of Fort Pierce from South Carolina earlier on Tuesday, Gilbert Edmond. Is this another kind of piece for fans that maybe like, all right, this will be shored up and they're moving in the right direction, at least when it comes to defense, because we feel good about the offense.
Yeah, I think so. And Marcus Woodson was not a poor coach. It's not like he was doing a bad job. But I don't feel like there was a feeling that he was doing a tremendous job with Florida State's defensive backs. And again, when you talk to a guy like the most prominent NFL defensive back that I've talked to a lot is Terrell Buckley, who's now coaching the XFL, is another name that people kind of were hoping the Florida State would look after. But he'll be head coach of the Orlando team in the XFL. But I talked to Terrell Buckley a lot, and he, you talk to him and Bryant McFadden, who played in the NFL for a long time, and they talk about the mental approach to playing cornerback at that level. And that's where a guy, certainly Antonio Cromartie and Corey Fuller, those guys that have that experience could bring it as well. But it's not just being a great athlete. There are, I would say, tricks of the trade, not just, techniques and different approaches, but the mental aspect, knowing what a quarterback's looking for, knowing what the receiver's going to do before he even runs it, before he even breaks out of his route. Those kinds of things. I think a guy like that can share that knowledge quickly with his players, and then they're going to believe it. Those guys, they may not have watched Patrick Surtain play in the NFL. I don't know, the age difference depends on when they started watching the NFL, but it's not hard it's not hard. It's not like you're having to dig up the black and white film to show him. And he was a very prominent player, and I'm sure they're going to buy into him quickly. So yeah, I think I think he'll, especially if he fits in well. I'm guessing again, Randy Shannon, another assistant coach on the defensive staff who's got strong South Florida ties, obviously was at UM for a long time. He's going to be very close to him. So, they're going to work well together. I just think there's a lot of reasons to think it would work well.
Yeah. Also the fact, he played at Southern Miss, so maybe he's a little Mississippi sort of inroads, and he's from New Orleans too. Right. So I'm sure him and Yak road trips, those two guys going to a high school in New Orleans.
I bet there's a lot of connections. I bet there's a lot of connections on the staff. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good sort of 1-2 punch there. So again, we expect to maybe have some official news on this Wednesday, but as you're watching us or listening to us, it's expected that Patrick Surtain will be the next defensive backs coach for Florida State, replacing Marcus Woodson, who is now at Arkansas. So there you go. Check out warchant.com throughout the evening and on Wednesday morning, and we'll be on top of it. Ira, as always, man, thanks for the time and the knowledge.
Thanks, Aslan. Talk soon.
Hit the thumbs up, everybody. Ira was here hanging out with us.